we will resume intercessory prayer and all of those other little things next week. Didn't want to put too much on myself. I felt like I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to do. But it seems like every minute I'm here, I feel stronger. I feel like jumping a little bit. I feel like but I really thought this was a weird time to come back for some obvious reasons. But I wanted to come back last week, to be honest with you. I wanted to come back last week, but I just wasn't. You know how you kind of know you're not there yet? I just knew I wasn't there yet. This week, it just seemed like I got a little stronger every day, and I felt like, let's do this. Just one of those odd times, though. But as we come close to the world's favorite distraction, we know what that is. I thought, rather than go through the details of it, we've done that before. I've done it several times myself, and I enjoy going through that because every time that we do it, we bring up some things that maybe we didn't know before. But this year, I thought maybe it might be better to go through the Bible and show that Yahweh is consistent. And he's obviously trying to tell us something as he explains certain things. As I said before, I've detailed several times why we don't keep Christmas. And in the past, we've done that and looked around and some people disappeared. It wasn't magic, just apparently they were upset. That's no reason to not do it. That's up to them. But in doing that, we tend to forget that this isn't an easy time. We do that, though, because of people who understand what's going on and others that don't. A lot of us do these things in terms of this holiday because of family pressures, peer issues, and other issues that maybe we haven't gotten strong enough to overcome yet. So I thought maybe it's time to go through and be more biblically honest about the intent and the origins of these things. What you got to understand, because it's been made so pretty and made so loving and made so child-friendly that we forget that at the center of it is one little three-letter word, S-I-N. Now, most people that don't understand say, well, what are you talking about? What do you mean? We prettied that up. It's got the nice little guy with the red suit and all. Yeah, okay. But sin has always been the issue. The initial warnings to the people of Israel came, and let's start in drop anchor at Deuteronomy, the 12th chapter, the 28th verse. Deuteronomy, the 12th chapter, the 28th verse, where it says, "Take heed to listen to all these words which I am commanding you, in order that it may be well with you and with your sons after you forever. When you do that which is good and right in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim, when Yahweh your Elohim shall cut off the nations from before you, where you are going in to possess them, and you shall possess them, and shall live in their land, take heed to yourselves, that you not be snared to follow after things they have done." after they have been destroyed before you, and that you not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? And I shall do so, even I. We do that. Wow, look what they're doing. Doesn't that look interesting? Let's do that. That looks like fun. That looks like something God might agree with. Not the way to go. Verse 31. You should not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, for everything hateful to Yahweh, which he detests, they have done to their gods. For they have even burned their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. All things that I command you, take heed to do them, and you shall not add to it, nor take away from it. Note that Israel was warned not to borrow or adopt the ways pagan nations use to worship their false gods and apply them. Then apply them to their worship of the true Elohim. Eloi is telling ancient Israel, and by extension, he's telling us, that sinful pagan customs are not right, even by modernizing them, making them interesting, making them fun, making them sweet, making them television friendly, but they're still wrong. Let's consider a simple analogy that'll maybe explain this biblical concept in a way that we understand. Let's suppose after a while a couple come together and decide they're going to get married. They get married, and the couple, after choosing it very carefully, move into their new home or their apartment. They look around after they've placed everything, go into a little box, and they place all around the new home, either it be the man or the wife, they place framed pictures of ex-girlfriends or boyfriends all around the place in prominent places. Now, how would you, as the new wife or husband, feel about these reminders of his or her former lovers? Would he or she be convinced that the other's devotion to them was true? Just wondering. Would this explanation suffice for you? Well, when I look at them, I think about you. Just wondering. I didn't think that would go over. I thought that might go over like a lead balloon, but just me. I just wondered. I doubted it, but I just had to throw that out there. Yet, many believers have no problem with substituting Sunday for Sabbath. Some, and we've run into this a few times, some do both, not realizing that you're insulting Elohim in doing this. Some have no guilt doing the same during Easter and Passover, and then the days of unleavened bread. And they feel no pressure doing these things. Many now allow Halloween celebrations and parties in their churches. I say that softly, so as not to offend. One of the best biblical examples of what Yahweh feels about humans borrowing and adapting false or pagan practices and customs for use in worshiping him is found in the book of Exodus. The example occurs right after Yahweh uses Moses and Aaron to free the children of Israel from Egyptian slavery. We pick up the story when, after leading the Israelites to Mount Sinai, Yahweh calls Moses up to the mount to receive instructions and to receive the 10 Commandments engraved in stone. The children of Israel must wait at the foot of the mountain for Moses to return. We're so good at waiting, aren't we? We're so patient. We can wait for so long, can't we? As time passes without the appearance of Moses, the Israelites grow a little restless. Exodus, the 32nd chapter, the first verse. Exodus, the 32nd chapter, the first verse. Now, when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Get up, make us gods, small g, who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So Aaron said to them, "Break off the golden rings that are in your ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people broke off the golden rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. He received them from their hand and made a golden calf, fashioned with a chiseling tool. Then they said, "This is your Elohim, Israel, which brought you out of the land of Egypt." What? What? It happens just that fast. Verse 5. When Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. Then Aaron made a proclamation saying, "Tomorrow will be a feast to Yahweh," in the person of a golden calf. Now, what was interesting to me along with all of this was the fact that if you saw that calf was pretty good size, which means that they must have had a lot of gold in their ears and their noses, on their feet, and wherever. But this was all part of what they were given by the people of Egypt, the ones that didn't come with them, when they left. Now hold your finger here. We'll get back to this and deal with it. Now, if any of you saw or remember the Cecil B. DeMille version of the Ten Commandments, you saw the sanitized version of what went on there. You saw grown men and women playing about the golden calf as if they were children, chasing each other, playing tag, and all of the little cute stuff you see kids do. That was DeMille's way of diminishing what really went on there, but we can be honest. We can be real. This is not what happened. They began to have sex around the calves, doing what they saw others do in Egypt, going back in Egypt, and they did it not necessarily around calves, but the big thing in Egypt was cats. Cats were everywhere. They worshiped cats in Egypt. Babylon used other animals, principally cows, which is probably where they got that idea, but largely Egypt used cats in their worship. But the Israelites were having sex on and around the calf, along with the Egyptian mixed multitude of people who came out of Egypt with them when they left. All this during the Exodus. The best biblical hint of the true action portrayed here is in the exchange of the word play or sport or mock in Genesis 39:14, when Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph. Notice the words used here. Let's go to Genesis, the 39th chapter, the first verse. This is the best way to make things clear, is find something somewhere else that says the same thing, then you can say, okay, that's what they were talking about. Genesis, the 39th chapter, the first verse. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites. If you recall, his brothers, not liking his dream of being over them, beat him down, took his coat of many colors, and eventually, after throwing him in a pit, sold him to Ishmaelites. Well, Potiphar came along and bought him from the Ishmaelites. and brought him down there to Egypt. Verse 2. Yahweh was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that Yahweh was with him, and that Yahweh caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. Go down to verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said unto his master's wife, "Behold, my master knows not what is with me in the house." In other words, I know more about what's going on here than he does. And he has put all that he has in my hand in a way of complete trust. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against Elohim? And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day after day. Every day he had to go in there, and she comes right in with the same offer. Day after day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her or to be with her. And it came to pass after this time that he went into the house to do his work, and there were none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spoke unto them, saying, "See, he has brought me a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me. And I cried with a loud voice, and it came to pass that when he heard that I had lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment by me and fled and got him out." That word mock is the Hebrew sakak, a verb meaning to laugh, to make jokes, to mock. It is used in this expression. But in this case, it has sexual overtones, as in this particular verse, saying, "You're lying with me," or "You're having some sexual deal with me." Now let's go back to Exodus, the 32nd chapter, the 6th verse, where our fingers should have been. Except for those who had electronic devices. I'm not sure how to work that, but have fun with that yourselves. Exodus, the 32nd chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, "They rose up early the next morning, sacrificing burnt offerings and brought fellowship offerings. The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to sakak." It says here, "make merry." But at this point, Yahweh had had enough. Now, in his argument, note the separatist language he uses here concerning the Israelites and how he describes the golden calf in its former state. Verse 7, "Then Yahweh said to Moses, Go down, for your people who you brought up out of the land of Egypt have become debased. They quickly turned aside from the path that I commanded for them. They have made a molten calf, worshipped it, and sacrificed to it. This is your Elohim, O Israel, that brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Now again, notice that Yahweh did not accept the worship or form of sex practices of Egypt as legitimate worship, especially directed at him or to him. Despite Aaron's proclaiming a feast to Yahweh in verse 5 that would occur the next day, Yahweh's anger was kindled toward the Israelites for introducing pagan practices into what was to be their legitimate worship of him. Yahweh was ready to destroy the Israelites, that very people who he had just freed from Egyptian slavery, for such obedience until Moses intervened, which you can see on your own in Exodus 32:11 through 14, which we don't have time to get to, but that is what it is. That is not exactly, however, that's why I don't go that deep there, because that's not exactly what I want to point out here. What I want us to become aware of today is that we continue to sin and toy with the Word of God when we do things that the world does in ignorance. We're not ignorant. We know better. We do these things trying to please our children, trying to please our families, when the Word of Elohim has taught us better. But the one thing that the people of Elohim have allowed themselves to become embroiled in more than anything else is the one thing that, in my opinion, is causing the most pain at this point in our lives. Few of the bankers, accountants, or marketing types who have elevated Christmas to this level care a whit about what it's doing to our spirits. Doesn't matter. Long as money is made, it's all good. They don't care. And I doubt that they'll ever deal with the fact that the biggest pagan practices going today seem to have no ties to Yahweh, but have huge ties that no one wants to be honest about to the old ways and the old sins and the things that God has directly told us not to do. The entire world hinges on these practices, and Yahweh told his people not to do it and have nothing to do with it, and it wasn't Christmas, although Christmas is bound up in it like it was put there with crazy glue. Most people don't want to deal honestly with this because the Bible is quite clear on the issue, yet they say, oh, that's the Old Testament. We don't have to do that anymore. But let's uncloak Satan's biggest modern idol and deal with how we have become so tied to it. Once again, the initial warning against this idol came to the ancient Israelites, and as usual, in time, they ignored it. And we continue to do so to this day. Thus, the current building catastrophe. What's he talking about? It's a catastrophe which I believe will be the sin that causes the onset of the tribulation. Whoa, what could that possibly be? Well, let's find out. Leviticus, the 25th chapter, the 35th verse. Leviticus, the 25th chapter, the 35th verse, where it says, and if your brother becomes poor and comes unto thee, then you shall receive him. As a stranger or a sojourner, he shall live with you. Take you no usury of him or increase. But you shall have the fear of your God, and your brother shall live with you. You shall not give him your money upon usury. In other words, you don't sell him things as interest, nor lend him your food for increase. You give him the food and say, well, give me a little money to go along with it. No, you don't do that. I am Yahweh, who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your Elohim. We live in a country that is, while we sit here at worship, is even with this new and God-ordained administration coming into power, still planning to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid. And if anybody has noticed, this country has made welfare appear as if it is a crime to receive it, even when done properly as a temporary means to survive until you can get back on your feet. Whatever caused you to fall into that state, as far as most people are concerned, you're a gold brick and you should just go away. It's almost as if modern Americans, some, believe that we are not our brother's keeper. Let the fallen simply fade away. Look at how they, in most cities, when there's some big event coming, they come and sweep the streets and make the homeless get away so they're not seen. No one cares. No one cares about anyone except their own, as long as they've got it. How did somebody say a little while back? How did that go? Nobody wants you when you're down and out. Yet, Elohim has told us to help those in our families who need help, if we can. But our government only seems to have unlimited funds as far as corporations are concerned. They can give unlimited money for corporations and war. Love war. Makes all kinds of money. Had somebody say a long time ago, yeah, everybody talks about peace, but don't nobody care about peace because you can't make no money from it. There is little funding for widows, even less for the poor. And if you really want to know how we feel about the ill, go hang around the VA long enough, and you'll find out. Or the infirm. And all policy is set to take from the poor and give even more to the rich. Heard somebody say they were going to go up there and drain the swamp. Yet, the swamp in D.C. seems to be being, you ever gone fishing? You go sometimes where they'll have what they call a stocked pond. You know that is where they want everybody to be able to catch something, so they'll throw so many fish in there and let them stay there so you'll always have something there. It seems that with the swamp in D.C., they're being stocked with more wealthy alligators. It would appear that this policy of austerity toward the poor will continue in the new Trump administration. Some people, I tend to start calling him the last Trump because, in all honesty, he seems to be setting that up in his own way. I don't think it's going to have final implications that way. I'll explain that as I go along, but I call it the final Trump administration. Yet, what does God say will happen to a people who don't feel the need to help the downtrodden among them and don't sit and say, oh, that's the government's job? No. Exodus, the 22nd chapter, the 21st verse. Exodus, the 22nd chapter, the 21st verse, where it says, you shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. And what's fascinating about this, these same people that want to do this, all they talk about is aliens, those who don't belong here, those who shouldn't be here. You even hear some people, I've had it heard said to myself, why don't you go back to Africa where you came from? I was born in Cook County Hospital. What the heck are you talking about? Verse 23. If you afflict them in any manner and they cry out unto me, I will surely hear their cry. This is God talking. This is Elohim talking. This is the Godhead talking here. I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword. And your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. If you should lend money to my people, to the poor who is with you, you shall not be to him as a usurer. In other words, you don't lend at interest. Neither shall you lay upon him usury. Says it again. Don't sell at interest. If you at all take your neighbor's clothing as a pledge, you shall deliver it unto him before the sun goes down. Now, in financial terms, let's be real. Can we get real for a minute? This country is broke. It's broke. Your dollar is worth about a penny, if you really look at it. This country is broke. In moral and ethical terms, not only is it broke, this country is broken. And sin is the cause. But as we see, some sins God has spoken of specifically and has warned us that he will avenge them in kind as individuals and as a nation. The big banks have become the principal financiers of the government and has broken them through excessive and evil usury. Anybody that's been around more than 30 or 40 years remember when a can of soda was about a nickel. Now it's what, about $1? That's all interest. Interest on your money. But you see, this country is not even allowed to print or mint its own money. And the interest will soon collapse the entire country into nothingness. But this is what we don't know, some of us. Our stock market, Wall Street, if you will, is so mired in all other countries. Notice we all wolf and cry about Russia. We scream about China. But who's invested heavily in our markets? China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and many others. If this country were to collapse financially, and because of our business practice, it's become the practice of nearly the whole world to invest in our markets. If, and I really shouldn't say if, I should probably say when, this country's financial house of cards falls, the entire world's financial house will fall. Yet, nothing has changed in this practice. Yet the word of Yahweh continues to fall on deaf ears. Exodus, the 22nd chapter, the 25th verse, again. Maybe somebody didn't hear it the first time. If you should lend money to my people, to the poor who is with you, you shall not be to him or a country as a usurer. Neither shall you lay up upon him usury. If you at all take your neighbor's clothing as a pledge, you shall deliver it unto him before the sun goes down. Now, is that the practice of the payday loan people? Just asking. And who else is doing such brisk business during this time of year for people who are willingly going broke, trying to buy presents for everyone, most of which are going to be re-gifted because I didn't want that. She don't even know nothing about me. Well, she gonna give me that. We gonna get that to so-and-so, because she ain't gonna give me nothing no way. You ever see that commercial where the two women bring the boxes and she was giving her the boxes, she was hanging on to it like she didn't want to give it to her? That's how we all are at this time of year. As sad as that sounds, we always see the happy and we see all the good, but behind the scenes, all of that is there. And you got to be honest about it. Elohim is still trying to warn us. At Deuteronomy, let's not go back there. Deuteronomy, the 23rd chapter, the 19th verse. Anytime somebody repeats the same thing that many times, he's trying to tell you something. You shall not lend for interest to your brother. Interest of silver, interest of food, interest of anything that is loaned on interest. And believe me, don't overlook that thing of food. There is a prophecy in the Revelation that says that so much for a nickel, so much for a dime, and that it's going to get to a point where you're going to be, everything is going to be ferreted out a little bit at a time. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. We've only got so much, so you can only get so much. So don't think that it's impossible that you'll be sold food at interest. A loaf of bread right now in some parts of the world costs a whole paycheck. When they talk about whole paycheck, they're not kidding, and they're not talking about Whole Foods, okay? Verse 20, you may lend on interest to a stranger, and I'll deal with the particulars of this at another time. I think we talked about this at the Bible study at the feast a couple of years ago, but I think it's interesting to bring it back because maybe we've forgotten about it. But this stranger was very specific, and it was done for for God it was a good reason because of who they were, but that was only for them. It wasn't in general, and it doesn't go on to this day. But you shall not lend on interest to your brother, so that Yahweh your God may bless you in all that you set your hand to in the land where you go to possess it. Now, wherever you go is wherever you go, and wherever you haven't gone, that's where you are. So the same thing entails. Proverbs, the 28th chapter, the 8th verse. He who increases his wealth by interest, here we go again. He who increases his wealth by interest and unjust gain, he shall gather it for who? For him who will pity the poor. Now, is that saying it'll happen now? No, it may happen in the millennium or it may happen in some other time. But believe me, all that stuff that you're hanging on to now because you don't want to help anybody else, when God comes back in power, he's going to help somebody else. Know that. But that is the problem with this country. From the top to the bottom, that is the problem with this country. Everyone wants to be rich and cares not a whit for those who are not. No one feels any true compassion for the poor or those assumed to be so. As a consequence, the super rich and their money have bought off the entire government. They ship off the jobs to other countries where they use their citizens as slave labor, corrupted by the corporations who pay these communist and king-led governments to enslave their citizens to work for nearly nothing or nothing as slaves. Paying the countries pennies on the dollar, thus allowing U.S. and other countries' corporations to keep their salaries low, keep their profits from their keep their profits for their shareholders and their executives, and keep those as high as possible. Some CEOs make more money in a week than you make in several years. But the question is this: with this machine going so strong and going with such power, and no one dare even speak against it, much less make a move against it, who can step in when this whole house of cards tumbles to nothing and no one can save us? Who? Bible tells you who. The Antichrist, the beast. And most, in fear of losing their wealth, will welcome him with open arms. A God-man who can solve all your problems and answer all your questions and heal all the economic ills and unite all their politics and end all their religious squabbles and stop all wars and bring permanent peace and union to all nations. Sounds good, doesn't it? Till you realize who's doing it. A one world government, a one world leader, a one world, what's that word we don't like? Dictator. Now, the collapse itself will not cause this. No, it won't, because it's going to be a while before people realize what has happened. In some places, though, like here, it's going to be immediate, and the unrest will be immediate. The violence will be immediate. And at that point, the people will allow and beg for this strong man to emerge. We're already seeing the beginnings of it. Even as the government swears that the economy is strong, yet Yeshua warned of our attitude even as he hung on the stake. Luke, the 23rd chapter, the 28th verse. You would say that should have been the Halloween sermon, huh? Oh, never mind. Luke, the 23rd chapter, the 28th verse. But turning to them, Yeshua said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in which you shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts which did not suckle. And they shall begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry or the brown?" Good question. If we hate because of politics, if we hate and go into churches and shoot down Christians while they're worshiping, and then are rewarded by the police by a trip to McDonald's, what next? And this in the day of the green tree? Then we beat and berate people at political rallies where we're supposed to be coming together for a particular candidate. And then in a few days, we want to run around handing out gifts and act as if we're all so in love with a baby in a manger, while we don't even want to hear anything he says as a grown-up God who has already warned us of what is to come. And we act as if we don't believe it because it hasn't happened yet. We can't pretend to be people of God one day of the week and then be people of the world the other 6. It is time to begin to read this book and understand that Elohim sees what we're doing. Not here. He sees what we're doing everywhere. He has an advantage that one, I like that way Pastor Woodland used to call him, that one, or that one there, he used to call him. Satan he was talking about. But God can do something that one can't do. He knows what we're thinking, not only today, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 and 1/4 days a year. We're fooling no one. What we put out into the world through our actions will eventually come back to us. For despite the bleeding of some less than thoughtful people, and you heard me say it 1,000,000 times, the world is round. Let us not put out that which may come back to us either during the tribulation or worse. Note the words of warning again from our Messiah. Matthew, the 7th chapter, the 22nd verse. Matthew, the 7th chapter, the 22nd verse, where it says, "Many will say to me," and this is more for us than the rest of the world. They will have their time. We'll get back to that later. "Many will say to me in that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And through your name throw out demons, and through your name do many wonderful works?' And then I will say to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, those working iniquity or lawlessness.'" Let us know the word, keep the word, and love all people. Because the word is real. And don't ever forget, the world is round. God bless you all.